What's up, everybody? It's Ronald, and I promise you that next week we'll be back to doing television and film reviews as normal on this show. But today, I wanted to bring you a piece of the live show that we did back in February. The theme was Love on Screen, and if you weren't able to be there, let me tell you, it was a fantastic night. The storytellers made us laugh and cry, and the discussion made us think and cry some more. Shout out to Daisy Rosario for gutting us all with a very emotional scene from the animated Disney film Dumbo. Today, I'm going to share one small bit of the show with you. It's from my opening monologue where I talked about the 1988 film Big, starring Tom Hanks. I love that movie, and I used talking about that movie as a way to set up the evening for everyone. I wanted to share this portion for those of you who were unable to attend the live show so that you have a little taste of what the event was like. And for those of you who did attend, stay tuned after the live portion when I'll be here adding a little bit more that builds out the metaphor I mentioned while discussing the movie. So I hope you enjoy today's special episode. I'm Ronald Young Jr., and I'm in the studio. I love a good parable. And I remember one of the earliest movies that ever kind of made me think in a different way, that made me think this is doing more and more, was the 1988 movie Big. Big, starring Tom Hanks. And to start off the show, I just want to do a little quick review of Big. Do y'all mind? That's what I do on the podcast, yeah. All right, so that's Big from 1988, written by Gary Ross and Anne Spielberg, starring Tom Hanks, Elizabeth Perkins, Robert Loggia, and John Hurd. It was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Actor for Tom Hanks. I think that was his first nomination, if I'm not mistaken. Here's some fun facts. It was directed by Penny Marshall, Laverne of Laverne and Shirley, who also directed A League of Their Own and The Preacher's Wife. Yeah, right? It was the first film directed by a woman to gross over $100 million. Just saying. So, y'all probably remember Big, and for those of you that don't, Big is a movie about a guy named Josh Baskin. He's a kid, he's 12 years old, and he has a best friend named Billy. He goes to get on a carnival ride one day because he wants to impress his crush, and when he goes to get on that carnival ride, turns out he's too small to get on. So he's upset. Embarrassed in front of his crush, he walks up to this machine that says Zoltar on it, and he makes a wish, I want to be big. And wasn't very specific about that wish, so. Wakes up the next morning, he's Tom Hanks, and he's 29 years old. That's the plot of the movie. Now, those of you that watched it, it's billed as a fantasy comedy drama. That's what it's billed as. I think that Big is actually a romantic comedy. And in some cases, it's a straight up romance. Now, I know y'all are thinking, yeah, obviously falls in love woman. No. This movie is about a love triangle. And it is a millennial love triangle between wanting to be a child and the allure of adulthood. Sitting there watching this movie, and I watched it again recently. It holds up, because as a kid, I'm just like, wow, Josh Baskin, he's growing up. He's playing on trampolines. He's got a free soda machine. This is wild. He's out here killing it. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. As an adult, I watched it, and I was like, yo, they nailed this. Because if you think about us as millennials now, what do we want more than anything else? To stay young. And avocado toast, if you ask some people. But I'm sitting there watching it, and I realize that as he's getting older, he goes into New York City. He sits down in this motel room, and he's terrified. And this is what I think Tom Hanks almost got nominated for, because he sits down in that room, and he's crying. He's upset. He pushes the desk behind the door. Look, Big is on. It's on Disney+. Like, watch it when you get home, I promise you. It's only an hour and 44 minutes. You'll get right through it. And he's just sad. Then Billy comes, and they're, doing, now that he's in an adult body, he's doing all these adult things that seems to be cool. Like, think about y'all anybody who's a millennial, but everybody. Think about when you first became an adult, how cool it was to be an adult. You know what I mean? How cool it was to learn how to drive. How cool it was to just, be out of your house, to stay out past curfew if you had a curfew. But I might be telling on myself a bit. But yeah, or sneak to prom, I don't know. My parents are here. But yeah, think about all the ways that we flirt with the allure of adulthood. So we have Billy on the one side representing childhood, and on the other side, we have Susan. She's this woman that he meets, and there's a little flirtation going on, but that's the allure of adulthood. That's where we're like, oh man, what's going on over there? And there's little things that they do in the movie to indicate, first, what just looks like he's just interested in her as a woman. But if you think about it as a metaphor, it's really the way we feel about wanting to be adults when we're kids. It's that feeling that you feel, you're just like, oh, I want it so bad. I don't want to be in the house. I don't want to be in my room. I want to be out there being an adult. And when he consummates his relationship with adulthood in the movie, everything changes. All of a sudden, he's walking with a pep in his step. He's wearing suits. He's drinking coffee. And think about the ways in which that we did that. The first time you bought a couch, the first time you bought a car, the first time you got your big adult apartment, and everything started changing. All of a sudden, you can't hang out with us no more. I can't do these kids stuff. I can't go to dollar beer night or whatever it is y'all do. We got to go drink wine now, all that. Like that's, you know what I mean? We start to switch over and get into the allure. And eventually the movie boils down to a choice. And he has to make a choice in that moment. Now, this is a fantasy film, so of course the choice is, am I going to be a child or am I going to be an adult? But a lot of us are making that choice every day. So here it is, a love story. Do I love being an adult or do I still want to be a kid? So I'm back in the studio, and that was my big monologue. After it was done, I segued into talking about love and introducing the storytellers. Because this is a podcast, I have the ability to edit and update after the fact in a way that you can't when you're doing a live show. And now that I'm back in the studio, I want to add a couple of parts to that monologue that I wish I hit harder and expanded on while delivering it on stage. So I mentioned Tom Hanks being afraid in the hotel room, and that this scene is probably one of the reasons he was nominated for an Oscar. I stand by that because he portrayed fear so well. Even as a child, his fear made me afraid. As an adult, his fear evokes immediate compassion, and I want to comfort him. But also, as a metaphor for adulthood, think about some of your early adult moments, the existential dread, the first time you realized you might have to work a job for 30 years, the first time you realized how expensive rent was, or that you have to buy groceries every week, just any of the ways in which adulthood reveals itself to be massive and frightening. And you begin to understand how seemingly impossible it is to get your arms around it. I certainly remember how I felt in those moments, and it was hard. But eventually, you get over it, and you start figuring it out. In the movie, right after that intense scene of fear, it cuts to Josh and Billy desperately looking for the Zoltar machine to wish Josh back into childhood. It ends up being a difficult task that will take longer than they expect, and at one point, Tom Hanks, as Josh Baskin, delivers the line, "I'm going to be 30 years old for the rest of my life," which is kind of a meta thought for all of us who want to stay young and would love to stay one age forever. However, there are 3 points I want to make here. The first is that in my early days of adulthood, I remember trying to escape back to childhood. I thought about going back to school and getting another degree. I thought about getting a more fun job, like being a flight attendant. And I even wondered if I could quit my job and go back to being a camp counselor. That felt way more chill than the cubicle life of bills I felt resigned to. That instance of being 30 for the rest of my life. This idea of escaping adulthood is a practical matter in the movie, but in real life, I'd venture to say we've all done it. The second point I want to make is that after Josh understands that he'll have to be an adult for longer than he originally expected, he and Billy realize he'll need to get a job. Now, since this is a movie, there's some generous scripting to make this task easy, but I personally have felt the strain of getting the job that makes waiting for what I actually want easier. I'm telling y'all, this movie is one of the most brilliant metaphors of all time. Luckily, Josh lands in a place where he's able to excel because of his technological literacy, and eventually is promoted because it's a toy company, and because he's a child, he understands toys in a way the actual adults around him don't. This is the part where many of us adults find the sweet spot of adulthood. Whether it's our families or our jobs, somewhere in this big scary bit of adulting, we find space for ourselves, and this is when we start to believe we're getting the hang of it. My final point is that later in the movie, we find Josh back in that same hotel room with all of the same terrifying things happening on the street around him, but this time he's not afraid. It's all normal. He's eating Oreos, he's watching television, because Josh realizes, just like we all eventually do, that adulthood is terrifying all the time. But honestly, in most cases, we're going to be just fine. That's where the metaphor ends, because as a practical matter in the film, Josh returns to childhood after finding the Zoltar machine and wishing himself back. But for the rest of us, adulthood is a one-way trip. I'd give Big 5 of 5 stars. And with that, Leaving the Theater is a production of OhitsBigRon Studios. Thomas Tyra of Bias Studios mixes the show. Thank you, Tom. Show art from Heather Wilder. Theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. For more information about Big, check out our show notes. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at OhitsBigRon. That's at OhitsBigRon. You can find out more about this show and other OhitsBigRon Studios shows by following us on Instagram at OhitsBigRon Studios and on Twitter at OhitsBigRonStew. That's STEW. Leaving the Theater will be back soon. Thanks for listening.